So tonight, we're about to wrap it up. But before we do, I just want to give you a little tiny bit of review. So let me get myself together and share my screen so you can see exactly what it is I'm reviewing. So our first week was entitled Follow the Leader. Follow the Leader. And that graphic is no longer available on Canva, and that is why there's just a square there. Nonetheless, those were the first three verses of Psalm 23. Things we took away from that: got to know who your shepherd is. You got to, the shepherd is going to lead you to rest, but you got to know who your shepherd is, and you got to be following the good shepherd, not just anybody out there with a stick. And the shepherd will lead you in ways that bring him glory. The shepherd will lead you in ways that bring him glory. So that's what we learned in our first week. The second week is called Valley High. We talked about the valley of the shadow of death. Valleys are part of the journey, and we don't have to be afraid of the valleys. Why don't we have to be afraid? Because we can find comfort in the valley because God is there with us. He brings us comfort there in the valley. And then last week, we mixed it up. It was a little bit different. Use what you got. And we did a little different because we had one verse that we were looking at, and then we flipped over to another book of the Bible and took a story from there. That was in 1 Kings chapter 4, verses 1-7. The story of this widow who all she had was what she had. She didn't have nothing else. And she was worried that her boys were going to be sold into slavery. And the prophet said, what you got? Okay, use what you got. And all she had was a little bit of oil. And he said, go and get some other vessels and just start pouring. Pour. And she poured out what she had. The table is, we said the table is what you have. And the table has already been prepared. It's what you already got. And the oil, and that's what this woman had, this widow, she had some oil. And if God gave you the oil, then it's going to flow as long as you pour. That's what we saw in the story. If God gave you the oil, it's going to flow for as long as you are pouring. And the cup, like it says in Psalm 23:5, my cup overflows. Well, the overflow isn't for us. Any overflow that we have in our lives is not for us. And just like the woman in this story, the overflow of the little bit of oil that she had, she ended up selling it. She ended up selling it and paid off all her debts, and the rest was enough for her and her sons to live off of. It's not a story about selling your canned goods that you don't use and you're going to be a millionaire. That's not what the story is about. It's not one of those. Don't name anything, because only thing that's going to get claimed is your car. It's going to be reclaimed. So don't do Amen. That. Don't walk on the car lot and start touching cars and all that stuff. They're going to call the police, and we don't want the police to show up for anything. That was just a side note. Pause for station identification, just in case you weren't sure. So tonight, as we wrap things up, and you're going to have to forgive Jonathan's response when I share the title with y'all, because he doesn't know what the title is, because until about, 7 minutes ago, I didn't know what the title was going to be either. And then the Holy Spirit just gives me stuff. Tonight, Shirley Temple. Let me read for your hearing the 23rd Psalm, the 23rd division of the book of Psalms. This Amen. Is in the NIV. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right path for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. And here's where it is. Here's the Shirley Temple. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord. That's the temple. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In the ESV, it says it. It says it like this: surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The word of the Lord. Been blessed.
So I'm gonna teach them really quickly a little study tactic before I really get into this, because it'll make more sense if I do it this way. Little trick I learned a long time ago. I ain't been here that long. If Keith were teaching this, he'd tell you I've only been here for a fortnight. But a technique I learned a long time ago is when you're studying scripture and you learn the true definition of the word in the original language, replace what you see in scripture with what's actually there, whether it be in Hebrew or Greek. Once you find out what it's translated as, it makes a little bit more sense. So I'm gonna read verse 6 with the words in place already. So if you read it like that, then it says, only goodness and steadfast love shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall return to dwell in the house of the Lord for my length of days. Only goodness and steadfast love shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall return to dwell in the house of the Lord for my length of days. Now, as Keith and I were studying this in the war room, we came to an impasse that most ministers, if they're doing it right anyways, come to. How do we take this Old Testament text and apply it to a time after the New Testament covenant has been applied to us? Because David didn't have a grasp on what was coming after him. He may have had an idea. I think that David and God walked pretty tightly to where David could have got a couple of visions of what was to come. But I know for a fact that he didn't know that everything that came was to come. So when he says he shall return to dwell in the house of the Lord, it is safe to surmise that what he is talking about is the physical temple of God. That is where he wants to dwell, in the physical temple of God, because back then, before God sent his spirit down, in order to meet with God, you kind of had to go through a couple of things. And most of the time, you didn't even get to go back there. It was the priest that went back there behind the veil for you, because if you would have went back there, you would have surely died. Not surely as in only in this case, like you would have been dead. Like stepping into the Holy of Holies. Like, think about it like this. Keith and I, one of us would have to go behind the veil for you. But it got so real to where before y'all sent us in there, they would have to tie a rope around our waist, because there was a chance that whoever they sent in there wasn't coming back out alive. It was gonna have to, it was gonna be a search and rescue type mission. You have to pull that boy up out of there. This is why I tell people all the time, y'all clamor for these titles and these positions, but y'all really don't want that smoke. Because that's a heavy thing to do, is intercede for all of the sins of the people. And so David is talking about dwelling in the temple of God to experience the presence of God. However, because of Christ's sacrifice, we don't have to go to a physical building to experience the presence of God. Now, God has never been tied to a building or a thing. Quite frankly, God isn't even tied to a physically printed Bible. God is entirely too big to be confined in any space. So it's imperative for us to understand that while David was talking about dwelling in the house of the Lord for the length of his days, we have to look at this a little bit differently to apply it effectively here. So my first point is very simple. Told you I only got two for you. This first point is so simple, and that's how I know that we miss it, because we definitely overcomplicate the simple things. The first point is that goodness and mercy are walking behind us on this life journey. Now, if you are like me, you have heard Psalm 23 since you could hear. And when we get to this part, this is the feel good part. This is the part that really does make you feel, good. Like, yeah, I got goodness and mercy walking behind me everywhere I go. But we don't even realize how profound that actually is. Like, think about it. The goodness and mercy, or as it's translated from the Hebrew, the goodness and steadfast love of God is following us on this life journey. I told you before, yeah, it's best to look at Psalm 23 as if we are going on a journey. This is closeout night. This is the end of the road. Shout out to Boys to Men. This is the end of the road and the end of the journey. And at the end of a journey, you are, listen, I hope you do this. If you go out of town, please don't go out of town and just plan to make that your final dwelling place. Go back home. Get out to People City. Please. And I'm talking to people that come to Houston specifically. Like, please go home. They already can't drive down here. And that's all I'm gonna say about that. But the beautiful imagery that David depicts here is so important, because after your cup overflows, what's next? But what Keith and I discussed, not just in the war room, but we talk about this often. Leadership is more than just leading from the front. And since there are leaders of God here, I'm not going to say, oh, well, if somebody here is a leader. No, there are quite a few leaders on this call right now. And I have to break this down for you because it is extremely important. Leadership is not just about you getting in front of a bunch of people and saying, you do what I say, and that's it. Follow me. That's a part of it. But leadership is more so about knowing when to be at the front, knowing when to be at the side, and quite frankly, even knowing when to follow behind the flock. So if you think that all a leader does is just get up at the front and bark orders, you are sadly mistaken on what it is that a leader does. And I know this because of the model that is presented here. David's talking about the good shepherd. God isn't a one-dimensional God. God doesn't just have to lead from the front. God is so cold that he covers us all around. These are attributes of God. So they go in front of us. They stand next to us. They walk beside us. And as a leader, there have been times where I have been able to go up to the front and say, bet, this is what we're about to do. Let's do it. Follow me. And then now that I'm working with children, this might just be the best ministry lesson that I have ever learned in working with children. You really have to get alongside of them and say, hey, this ain't how we do this. This ain't it. I know what you're doing, but this is how it's supposed to be done. Here, let me help you real quick. Let me help you out with this. Put that down. Please stop. Like, and sometimes God does us the same way. Sometimes God will say, hey, look, follow my lead. Sometimes he'll go behind us to cover us and to keep us from looking back to what we just got through walking out of. And then there are times where God will get alongside of us and say, baby, it's all right. I get it. I understand. And like I told you when we were talking about the valley, sometimes God will pick us up and put us on his back. That's what I needed this week, is for God to pick me up and put me on his back. It's the only reason why I'm here tonight, is because he was gracious enough to do that. So his goodness and his steadfast love, again, we hear it so much, but you don't even understand the magnitude of what steadfast love really means in this case. If you go back to the beginning of time, before God even said, let there be, he already loved you. He already had all of this in place to cover you even when you fail. So if you cannot find an instance of God's goodness in your life, I want you to go and look in the mirror right now. You got a phone, pull it out. Be careful when you open up that front camera, because that front camera humbles all of us, but do it anyways. And look at yourself and just understand that you are an example of the goodness and the steadfast love of God, just where you are, just as you are. It doesn't matter what you've done before. I don't care if you just got through sinning 5 minutes before you got on this call. You are still an example of the goodness and the steadfast love of God, because before you even came into this world, he saw everything that you would do, saw every mistake that you would make, every nasty, foul thought that came into your mind before he even purposed you to be. He looked at you and said that you were good, that you are his workmanship, that you are the apple of his eye. He already deemed you good. And it ain't got nothing to do. Listen, I promise it ain't got nothing to do with you. I promise it ain't got nothing to do with you, and it ain't got nothing to do with me either. But it is simply because God is that good. God is so good that his goodness doesn't. Trying to explain the goodness of God, I would literally be here to the end of my life. And then some, trying to explain to you the full magnitude of the goodness of God, and I still wouldn't even come close. His goodness is indescribable, and his love truly transcends all logic. And that's exactly why I believe in it. That's exactly why I know it's covering me and walking behind me and keeping me and guiding me. So I ask you this, because I'm already in your living room. I'm going to put my feet up on this coffee table. If the goodness and steadfast love of God is enough to follow behind you, why are you so afraid of what's in front of you? If you're scared, go to church. Oh, wait, you're here now. If the goodness and the steadfast love of God is backing you, if that is what you can rest your back on, what is there to be afraid of what's in front of you? If the gates of hell ain't going to penetrate his church, why do you think they're going to penetrate you? Why do you think they're going to come up against you? Why do you think they're going to stop you? Could it be that the biggest thing that's in your way right now is you and the negative thoughts that you feel about yourself? When's the last time that you told yourself what God said about you, that you were fearfully and wonderfully made? That he made us a little bit lower than angels, but yet he thought we were to die for. Like, when was the last time that you told yourself that God thought that I was to die for? And I'm not talking about no corny social media posts, because I hate those. I really do. I really, really do. But I'm talking about really just thinking about the magnitude of the love of God for you. And that's why I said that we hear, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. But there are some days where we just don't feel like it. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to feel like that, because, well, life happens. We all get down sometimes, myself included. I just had to hold a few of my babies the other day because of something that happened to one of their classmates. And seeing these children cry, it broke me in a way that I have never been broken before. But because the goodness and the steadfast love of God was standing behind me and standing in me, I was able to get through that, not only without crying, but telling them and letting them know, listen, if you see something, say something. Nobody should be putting their hands on y'all without consent. These are just first graders, but we're already having to have lessons and talks with them about consent. If you think that the enemy is not out here like a lion seeking who he can devour, you got another thing coming, and he's coming after these babies. But I had to make up in my mind in that moment that as long as I'm on that campus, all of these children are mine. All of these children are under my watch, and they're under my wing, because that's what I came there for. That's what I was put there for, to be his light on that campus. Once again, if the goodness and the steadfast love of God are behind you, why are you so afraid of what's in front of you? I didn't go to work Tuesday prepared to talk to children about sexual assault and molestation. I just wasn't. I didn't wake up that day. But I didn't wake up that day to actually break up a fight either, but I did. And because it happened, it reminded me of the fact that, listen, you can't pick every battlefield that you own, but as long as you got the Lord of all creation backing you, going before you and surrounding you, there's no battle that you can't overcome. So stop being so afraid to get it done. It ain't always going to be easy. It's not always going to be nice and sweet and cookie cutter. If it was, then anybody could do it. But God picked you to do it. Means there's going to be some suffering in this. Uh-oh. I just cussed. My bad. I forgot. Y'all don't like the word suffering. Y'all would want for me to sit up here and tell y'all that it's all easy now that you've given God your yes. Baby, I'm sorry, but it's just getting started. And I don't tell you this to scare you. I tell you this to give you the real, because goodness and mercy wouldn't have to back you if this was all easy, if this was all just sweet all of the time. I wish it was. These past 2 weeks, I have had to deal with things that back to back, anybody else would have lost their mind. I literally just sat down and processed all of the stuff that I've had to hear and deal with in the past 2 weeks. Last night, I was like, oh God, thank you for keeping my mind. But that's the goodness and his steadfast love keeping me, surrounding me, helping me, molding me, and guiding me. Now, like I said, I only got 2 points for y'all. You're welcome again. But that last point is very, very simple. But our souls are longing to be with God. This is something that I have known for at least the past 7 years. And this is just a simple fact. Whether you believe in God, whether you are an atheist, or whether you are the color purple, your soul is longing to be in contact and in communion with its creator. You may not know it, but your soul does. And your soul knows that because your soul came straight from God. And that's why when we seek out other things to fill the void in us that can only be filled by God, we're always left empty. Doesn't matter what you try to fill it with. You can try to fill it with good intentions. You can try to fill it with sex, alcohol. You could try to fill it with religion, but if it's not God filling the void in your soul, you will always be empty. I promise you that. There's not enough money in the world that can fill your soul enough to heal that void that can only be healed and filled with God. And so our souls are always longing to be in communication with God. That's why when it says I shall dwell, it really means I shall return to dwell. I'm going back to where I came from. Because if they have not told you before, I will gladly tell you now, this life right here ain't it. I know it ain't it because, well, this is pretty trash on this side. I can't even sugarcoat that. And Keith said it in the war room the other night. He was like, man, if this is it, Lord, take me now. Like, please, get me out of it. Like, if all that I have to look forward to is what's on this side, nah. But see, my soul knows better. It's longing to be with him. And I understand more and more every day while Paul is like, listen, if it was up to me, I would have been gone, but it's for y'all benefit that I'm still here. I get it because I'm longing to see the one that thought that I was to die for. And so we all are going to return to our dwelling place. Where does the body go when you die? It goes back into the ground from whence it came from. Where does the soul go when you die? Listen, I hope yours goes to be with its creator in the end. That is my prayer for you. Because my name in the book, I checked yesterday. It's in there. It ain't like in the VIP list, nothing, because I'm sorry, celebs don't really get a free, pass and stuff like that. But it's in there. Our souls are constantly longing to be with God. And so if there is a part of you right now that is seeking for a place to belong, for a place to be, for a place to rest, for a place to exist, God already gave that to you in the beginning. And it's time for you to line your soul back up with him. Because there's a difference between a resting place and a dwelling place. In the earlier verses, David was talking about where God leads us in green pastures and beside still waters. We're still on the journey at that point. Those are literally just the Buc-ee stops on this journey of life. And Buc-ee's is great, but you want to know what's better than Buc-ee's? Getting to my destination after I leave Buc-ee's, aka the crib. Our souls are looking for a dwelling place. And so many of us have placed our soul in these dwelling places that are just temporary. We place them in social media validation. We place them in titles and accolades and degrees and talents. But kings and kingdoms shall all, not some, not most, not a little bit. Songwriter said they shall all pass away. But there's something about that name that you got to put some respect on that name. It is a privilege and an honor to be able to call the Most High God my refuge, my hiding place, and my dwelling place. I don't have to just stop there when I'm weary. But God wants me to dwell in him even when I'm happy and there's nothing wrong. Make your soul's home in God so that you can stop going from broken home to broken home to broken home. Ain't you tired of that? Ain't you tired of every place that you stop at being broken and temporary and not lasting when you have an everlasting God that you can lean on and dwell in? Well, I can't see God. Sometimes I just need God to give me a physical hug. Okay, I understand that, but I'm gonna give you the formula here. And it's very simple. If you make God your dwelling place, the people around you will add to that dwelling place because he'll send them to you. I know that because I'm living proof of that. This space is living proof of that. And we were just two preachers in a group chat, talking, chilling, fellowshipping. And then it grew to be much more than what it was. And even though we didn't know, God knew. But I brought that up to let you know that I'm telling you. But making God your dwelling place is so important because when God is your dwelling place, it's literally like building a house on a solid foundation. On Christ, the solid rock, I stand. All other ground, spouse, co-workers, friends, social media, all other ground is sinking sand. Every single one you can think of. So if you want a true dwelling place, you got to build it on the rock. And then you have to build all of your relationships around the rock. Now, for some people, that's a touchy subject because, you don't want to talk about church and stuff like that all the time. And Jesus is, oh, Father God, nobody wants to do that 24/7. Quite frankly, I don't do that 24/7. And y'all know this. And so as we come to the end of this particular series, to the end of this journey, I want to encourage you to keep in mind that the Good Shepherd is always leading you. And he'll lead you from this side to the next side without missing a beat on his end. Old folks used to say, let the Spirit lead you all the way from earth to heaven, because they didn't pronounce the V, they put a B there, and I don't know why. So earth to heaven. But they didn't lie when they said that, because things always work out better for me when I let God lead. And when I let him come on side of me and tell me, hey, you holding on to that too long. Give it here, let it go. You can't handle that. And he's even pushing me from behind to keep reaching for what it is that he's got in front of me. Don't be afraid to let go. Don't be afraid to let go, to reach out, because if you aren't letting go, how your hands going to be open enough to reach for what it is that he's got right in front of you? Keep following the Good Shepherd and keep following his lead. Keep doing what it is that you need to do so that you can be a testimony for somebody else to see what it's like when you are following the right path. May not always be easy. It's not always going to be fun, but it'll always be worth it because it'll always end up good. Going back to our Born Sinner series, everything works out for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. That's you. So if you know that, and since you know that, hold your head up when you walk. Speak with confidence and conviction and clarity. You represent your shepherd. And I don't want anybody to get a misrepresentation of him because of how I'm carrying myself. Jokes are one thing, laughing is another thing. But if you can't see God on me, then I'm doing something wrong. Because that's the shepherd that I'm following.